and welcome to Forum 360. I'm your host today, Bill Saus, and we have a wonderful topic and a guest, Jeff Holland. We're taking our global view into our local perspective for animal welfare rights and the role of the local SPCA or humane societies in Northeast Ohio and what the local people can do to get involved. Jeff, good to have you with us on Forum 360.
Glad to be here.
Our topic is one where we have to understand what are animal SPCA groups doing nationally and then locally. What are the organizations you're dealing with?
Sure. So probably a lot of people are familiar with the ASPCA, right, and maybe the Humane Society of the United States, HSUS. Mm-hmm. And those are wonderful organizations. They do things all over the country. But for animal cruelty prosecutions, it's the local county humane society that does most of those. And those are nonprofit organizations, so they're not the dog warden. A lot of people confuse the dog warden with the county humane society. The dog warden's office is part of the government. They get tax money. The local humane society has humane agents that go out and investigate and prosecute animal cruelty, but they're nonprofit organizations, so they really need local help, volunteers, and donations.
Now they depend on the laws of the state, and you're very familiar being the foremost animal welfare attorney in the state of Ohio, Jeff. Give us a little bit of background how you started out getting involved in animal cases, animal cruelty cases.
Well, I'll tell you, my first case was in the Medina Municipal Court. It was actually in 1991, so 25 years ago this year. And I was on the board of the local Humane Society at the time and hadn't prosecuted any animal cruelty cases at that point, but there were over 90 dogs that were being kept and some horses as well that were being kept in an individual's property. And the local prosecutor, frankly, was very honest about it and said they didn't have any experience with this sort of thing. So I was appointed and prosecuted that case, and ever since then I've been working with counties. I've done over 30 different counties in the state of Ohio, and it's now about 80 to 90% of my practice.
Would you give our Forum 360 viewers and listeners an understanding as to the role of the prosecutor in SPCA cases for each county that you deal with? How do you get involved?
Yeah, so what happens is the local county humane society has humane agents that are law enforcement officers.
Okay.
They're actually appointed by the nonprofit, but then they have to do mandatory training through the state. Then they go to the county probate court, and the county probate court actually has to confirm that this is the right person for the job, and they can also be removed by the county probate court. So that individual goes out there, they're law enforcement, and when they get a new case, then they can take it either to the local prosecutor who does all kinds of prosecutions, or sometimes the Humane Society will elect to get a special prosecutor, essentially, which is the role that I fill.
Very good.
And the only cases we prosecute are animal cruelty cases.
And what animals, Jeff, are the most neglected, do you think, especially in Northeast Ohio?
Oh my gosh, I tell you what, I've had just about every kind of animal, but the ones that come up most frequently, you can imagine, dogs, cats, and a lot of horse cases, frankly.
Right.
So there's just such an overpopulation of dogs and cats in particular that people tend to unfortunately do a lot of hoarding activities where they have way more animals than they can possibly handle. That's pretty common.
Now, who determines the extent of the prosecution? The special prosecutors such as yourself, or do you have to work with other organizations, the local court, county prosecutors? What is your extent? How far can you provide as far as the legal rights for the animals? How far do you go?
Right. Well, I'll tell you, You mentioned about legal rights, which I think is an important topic, because people say, you know, what are animal rights? And really, animals do have some rights, and that is that there is no other kind of property. Animals are property.
Right.
There is no other kind of property for which you have a mandatory obligation to care for. So animals, you have to feed them every day.
Right.
You have to clean up for them every day. You have to have fresh water available for them all the time.
Exactly.
So that's how these are a little bit unusual cases. The county humane society, once I am appointed, I have the authority, just as any other prosecutor,
Okay.
to handle and decide what cases to bring and how they're handled.
Now, you were saying the local courts, mostly municipal, but possibly common pleas courts? get
Sometimes
involved?
common pleas. The vast majority of animal cases in Ohio are misdemeanors, so they're handled by the municipal courts. There are only very few occasions where where an animal case can be a felony. Dog fighting is one, and if you have a second offense where you have deliberately harmed an animal, you're convicted once, that's a misdemeanor. If you do it a second time, you deliberately harm an animal and you're convicted, then it can be a felony. And there are a couple other situations.
Now, that's all covered. The Ohio legislature enacted the Ohio Revised Code Title IX, which is that the legal substances for this type of case would be under Title IX, correct?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, the criminal code, if you look at a bookshelf,
Right.
of all of the laws, right? They all have each volume is numbered. So you have Title 29. You have a whole book 29. In fact, maybe 2 or 3 books because
Criminal.
it's so many criminal cases. But you don't find the criminal cases for animals in Title 29. You have to go all the way down to Title 9, which is animals and fences.
Right.
And then if you want to know what the definition of cruelty is, you can't find it there. You have to look in Title 17, which is, of course, corporations.
Corporation.
And that's where you find the definition of animal cruelty. So a lot of prosecutors, they don't get these cases very often. They do a terrific job, but most prosecutors have lots and lots of cases before them, OVIs and domestic violence and assaults and thefts and drug cases and so forth. And so animal cruelty becomes a very, very small portion of most prosecutors' work.
So as a specialist in this area, even though you have a general practice, your office in Sharon Township, Medina County, Fairlawn and Summit County, you have offices. Should somebody have a grievance about an animal case in these 2 or 3 counties in our Northeast Ohio area where you practice, first they should go to whom, or should they contact your office to prosecute a case?
Well, first it should go to the County Humane Society. If you have a County Humane Society in your county, and most Northeast Ohio counties do, that are involved in animal cruelty prosecutions, you should go to them.
All right.
But county sheriffs can prosecute animal cruelty cases. So if you're not getting satisfaction from your local Humane Society, you can go to them. You can go to the local police. They all have jurisdiction to do these kinds of cases. But be persistent and make your reports.
Let's get an example of a violation, a typical violation of animal cruelty that is under Title IX, where you believe that, what are some of the elements that might, say animal cruelty, that you would have to prosecute, satisfy beyond a reasonable doubt?
Right.
What are some of the elements that
Right.
you're looking for?
Yeah. So, obviously, when somebody is deliberately trying to harm an animal, that's the obvious one. So if you have a situation where somebody is beating an animal or throwing it across the room, these are cases that I get with, unfortunately, some frequency. Often it has to do with domestic violence, frankly.
Right.
Somebody who is trying to have power over their spouse or over their girlfriend. Usually it's the guy, I hate to say that, but those are kind of obvious. The ones that are maybe a little bit less obvious are the neglect cases, and the neglect cases are by far the most frequent cases. So in Ohio, it is cruelty, any act, omission, or neglect which causes unnecessary or unjustifiable pain or suffering. So you really have to keep animals in a clean environment, because being in their own filth can cause irritation of skin, it can cause respiratory problems, it can cause eye problems, it can cause all kinds of things. And obviously you have to provide adequate food, water, and shelter.
Our guest is Jeff Holland, area attorney, serving the Medina and Summit County area and throughout Northeast Ohio. As a matter of fact, Jeff has prosecuted cases in, I believe, over 30 counties in the state of Ohio. This is Forum 360. I'm your host, Bill Saus, and Jeff Holland, again, our special advocate for animals. Which cases of animal cruelty have you considered in your career, let's say one or two of the most serious?
Gosh, I had a guy who decided to stomp a black cat and drink the blood to invoke the power of Satan.
Right.
That
so
would be a bad one.
some sadistic.
Yeah, sadistic stuff is bad. So I would say that's bad. I would say it's also pretty bad when you have in a really, really large number of animals, and I've seen as many as 150, 200, 250 animals being kept by an individual, and the individual maybe isn't trying to harm the animals, but at one point they started out, and I'm not a psychologist, but they start off sometimes with an altruistic view. They take in a few animals and they want to love the animals, they want to care for them. But at some point it turns around and it becomes more about me. I want to possess the animals. I want to have more and more. I'm the only one who can take care of them. They only love me.
Right.
And then it becomes a sickness.
And I would think that due care and the level of care and the reasonable man test is used more or less if a court were to look for the neglect portion.
Sure.
And of course, beyond a reasonable doubt, if let's say, a jury might have to decide this case.
Sure, they might, and they often do.
What can the general public do to help sponsor or provide funding for these prosecutions? Because obviously, there's a lot of volunteerism, like veterinarians and so forth, but is there a need to get involved in local Humane Society funding?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't say it strongly enough. We have laws in Ohio, and there's some pending legislation. It's always going on about animal cruelty laws, but the laws that we have right now can really protect lots and lots of animals if people will help by contributing to their local county humane society, and you have to find out which it is in your county. So there's the Portage APL, there's the Cleveland APL, there's the Humane Society of Greater Akron in Summit County, there's the Medina County SPCA. I've represented all of those. There's Geauga County Rescue Village. So if you make monetary contributions, that's really, really so vital to their work. Also, being a foster home for an abused or a neglected animal. I've done this countless times in my personal home. I have a foster dog in my house right now. It's delightful to deal with her.
Very good. Working with the local veterinarian societies and local vets are important too.
Sure, absolutely.
They've helped you. Are there problems with the local SPCAs, the local humane societies, when they see agricultural problems, farms that are providing maybe neglectful care of animals such as chickens and cows and animal farm?
It absolutely happens. I would say that most farmers are very responsible with their animals. They care for them very well. It's part of their livelihood. But everybody's a human being, and there are people who are neglectful of farm animals as well. Horses is a big problem, and you don't have to be a farmer for sure. It could be a horse owner. Horses are not considered to be companion animals in Ohio. But really, isn't that the niche that they fill for most people? I mean, horses are rarely working the field for I mean, they do for people in the Amish community, obviously, but
And the racetracks.
and the racetracks, they do work. But there are lots and lots of horses out there that are kept by individuals, and the amount of money and time and care that it takes to have horses, and I should know because I'm a horse owner, is a lot. And if you're not capable of doing it, you shouldn't be doing it.
Now, one area of animal abuse that we see a lot of law enforcement involvement, especially in the cities and in the farm communities, cockfighting,
Oh, yes.
chicken fights.
Oh, yes. There's a bill out right now trying to make cockfighting a felony. Right now, cockfighting is only a 4th-degree misdemeanor. So the maximum jail is 30 days in jail, $250 fine, whereas dogfighting is a felony on a first offense.
Again,
why the difference?
Again, it's gambling. It's activity that's not to be in our society, not to be involved with.
Right, sure.
What are the future plans for legislation? I'm kind of shocked, Jeff, to know that prosecution might be limited in the future to just county prosecutors or municipal prosecutors, and they'll take away people such as yourself the responsibility to do the prosecution, people that are experts. How is this issue coming out right now?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, there is a bill out there. It's House Bill 278. It was introduced by Representative Hambley, and he previously introduced House Bill 198 last year. Both of them are attempts to do away with the Humane Society's ability to appoint a prosecutor who has specific experience with animal cruelty cases. I think it's a mistake. People can judge for themselves. If they feel one way or another, they should certainly contact their representative.
I'm interested in how the legislature gets involved in animal cases. Do the veterinarian societies or the veterinary associations of Ohio provide information to the state legislators, as well as yourself as an attorney?
To a degree, they absolutely take a position on different statutes. There are a number of bills out there that are pretty interesting.
It's interesting, you are working constantly on laws, you and your staff, other attorneys in your office, talking about bestiality, and there's the Goddard's Law, named after Nick Goddard, the meteorologist from
Wonderful
this area.
guy.
What are some of those legislation proposals looking toward?
Yeah, so bestiality is Senate Bill 215, and that passed the Senate already, so it's now being considered by the House. But in Ohio, it is not illegal to have sexual contact with an animal. Right now, the only thing that prohibits that is if you cause unnecessary pain and suffering to an animal, which is the regular animal cruelty bill. The problem with this kind of behavior is that if somebody's having sexual contact with an animal, it probably means that there's a lot of other things going on that we may or may not be able to know about.
Right.
Because animals can't speak for themselves. I mean, it's an old thing that people say. Obviously, they can't speak for themselves.
Yeah.
And the reason it's so hard to get at some of these defendants is they're committing the crime against their own property.
Right.
So sometimes they commit it against somebody else's property, but often it's in behind closed doors.
Now, you have to use subpoena powers and search warrant powers from the courts. Does that help you locate and investigate the suspicious activity which could lead to prosecution?
Absolutely critical. And having good relations between humane societies, local sheriff's departments, local police, the courts is absolutely critical. But yeah, humane agents work with local law enforcement all the time. They work with local judges to get search warrants. They have all the activities that regular police have.
This happens, unfortunately, with children as well, and young babies, but where people literally drop children off at local churches, local welfare centers anonymously. But I notice it's even worse when when pets are dumped, because usually a litter of puppies will be dumped somewhere.
Yeah.
Is that something that you think would need investigation, and have you ever gotten involved in people that dump animals and don't want to pursue the care of the animals or adopting the animals out?
Absolutely. Well, you know, frankly, it's the coward's way out. If you can't care for an animal, there is nothing wrong with being able to take the animal. If you can't find a home and you can't care for them, you've done everything that you can to try to rehome the animal, it's much better to take the animal and have it humanely euthanized than to dump it off in the woods or dump it off with a farmer or something else. Animals, dogs and cats, are not wild animals. They do not do well in the wild.
Right.
So it's a crime. It's a second-degree misdemeanor on a first offense and a first-degree misdemeanor on a second offense. So dumping animals is absolutely illegal.
Now, there was a lot of exotic pets that are brought into Northeast Ohio that might not fit in this area. Exotic animals that probably shouldn't even be pets. They were occasionally we hear pets being brought up from a tropical zone or southern United States, alligators and certain exotic snakes and reptiles for pets, and they escape, or, you know, is this a problem also? Do you get game wardens or local county animal wardens that give you stories such as that?
Sure. We had a case in Cleveland not that long ago with a guy that had 30 snakes in his basement in a city dwelling in Cleveland. I've had cases with people a guy who had drawers, and each drawer had a snake in it. And it was over 100 snakes, of which most of them were dead because they were not properly cared for. So yeah, it's certainly possible. There is an exotic animal cruelty, or is an exotic animal law in Ohio. So most dangerous exotic animals are not permitted to be kept as pets anymore unless you've previously gotten an appropriate license.
Gotcha. If I were to say, what are the most involved programs that your group involves with, other than the local humane societies, the veterinarian societies? Are there organizations that help you with funding, that provide funding from the state level?
No. Generally, a county has an obligation to pay $25 a month to support a humane agent. Well, you can imagine that's not very much. House Bill 278 would raise that to $150 a month, but that's $1,500 a year additional money. It actually, I mean, if you can imagine hiring hey, I'll pay you $1,500 a year to work for me. No one's going to do that. So it seems like a nice contribution, but it actually is effectively worthless.
You were talking a bit ago about agribusiness, pigs, cows, chickens.
Sure.
And you said that there's been some constitutional changes. The Livestock Board is being involved in Ohio.
Yes, the Ohio Constitution now provides for the creation of a livestock board, and they have put together some standards for how livestock is to be cared for. Some of those standards are, a little bit hard to tell about the specifics, but some of them actually are looking forward. So we're phasing out the battery cages for chickens and confinement for veal calves and so forth.
Some of the factory farm problems.
Sure.
Now, to final wrap-up thoughts and questions for today's Forum 360, our guest is Jeff Holland, prosecutor for animal welfare cases in Ohio, one of the foremost prosecutors in the country. And I just want to ask you, people are probably listening, tuning in and saying, why should we care about animals? There are people that we should care about more. Why should we care about animals? Why should you get involved in prosecuting animal cases?
Well, I mean, I hear people say that people care so much about animals they don't even care about people. Right. And my reaction to that is that when we hear of a child being abused or a person being abused in domestic relations or whatever it is, we expect the court to take care of those people, and they do. When an animal gets its day in court and gets justice, it's news. That's why people get so excited. Why is it important? Because empathy is what we build our society upon. And this is the canary in the coal mine. People who can't be empathetic to the suffering of an animal, there are lots of studies which indicate that it leads to violence against human beings, neglect of children, neglect of the elderly, neglect of the disabled, And it's really, really an important issue that Ohio should be at the forefront of at all times.
I often see success cases, and I know you've brought some animals from very disparaging conditions into a positive home life, return them back to where they need to be health-wise as far as veterinarian care. How does that make you feel as a prosecutor, knowing that you've trained specifically for this type of success? I mean, you've seen people come out and say, thank you,
Yeah.
I've now adopted this dog is doing well, this horse is doing well, this cat's doing well.
Yeah, this is the best job in the world because the people who do the real work are the humane societies. They take care of the animals, they investigate the cases, they put endless amounts of money and time into it. The animals get better, and everybody thanks me, and I haven't done anything.
Well, I want to thank you, Jeff Holland. Thank you for being a part of Forum 360, talking about animal welfare. I'm Bill Saus, your host. Thank you.
Forum 360 is brought to you with support from Electric Impulse Communications, Kim and Harvey Nelson, Rubber City Radio Group, Acronist.com, Hudson Cable, Medical Mutual of Ohio, Forum 360 supporters, and the Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron.